So that is the Gold Line on its way to South Pasadena, and beyond from downtown Los Angeles. This is hard for me. This is really difficult. So, because if I didn't have you working on this project with me, I would not be able to be recording this segment right here. I was so traumatized, and this goes back to the historic trauma. I'm sorry it's loud. This normally Marmion Way, it's busy early in the morning, it's early at night, and normally there's not much traffic, but it is used as a main traffic corridor for commuting in the rush hour. So this is the other side. That's the Ziegler House, the Child Care Center, Southwest Museum Station, and the Southwest Museum of the American Indian. And I'm going to try and keep this brief, but in being with you today and trying to give you a picture of what it was, I knew that I had to get. So there's the St. Gabriel Mountains, the view of that's Pasadena. That's to the north. That's actually Deb's Audubon Park, Audubon Center, Nature Center. Yeah, it's a nature center, and also recreation. I forget how many acres. And it connects through this thing called Sycamore Park. That's the back side of Casa de Adobe, which I showed you the front side, which Autry shut down. Autry shut down the museum. So these are historic things that are not being, the public is not benefiting from the tourism, the history. But I was so severely traumatized by, and it is the repeat, I can read it to you out of the Gibson's, the Chickasaws, our history, that the government allowed the squatters to make the Indians miserable, would not enforce. They were invading, and that's what was happening with me. It was just incredible violence, criminal activity. I was really traumatized when I left here, and I just couldn't even come back. That's when I fled to more peaceful land where I met you. So this is the I know. So this is the front side. This is the Marmion side. I just, after showing you the big picture, but I didn't, you can't imagine from that little picture of just the front of my property, how the station fits with the museum, fits with my property, and what's on either side of it, which is what I was trying to show you, is being very clearly, intentionally, pieces are being put in place for it to be an intentional, gentrified community. I mean, quite intentionally. When they came in doing the community meetings and asking us what we wanted 20 years ago, and that's when the library came and the Ziegler House, childcare and all that, they already knew. And it didn't include Mexicans and Indians, and as you pointed out, Indians don't even exist, so of course it didn't include Indians. Yeah. So, I'm so grateful you're on the other side of this YouTube. I can do this because, even thinking about doing it was really hard for me. Now, there used to be a mural there. The first mural I painted, and with an artist named Betty Dorr, Indian theme, native meaning plants, animals, and people in terms of their symbols. The next, they paid a lot more money. The city paid for both. On the Autry property, this was this huge mural. And that's all really well documented in photographs and stuff. But then now they've come through and they've just taken out the whole mural. So just a loss, which very poor management, allowing the criminal activity based across the street from my property, gang and criminal, homeless, and it was just. So it was a repeat of my ancestors, my Chickasaw ancestors, not my Blackfeet ancestors, but my Chickasaw ancestors. It was a real repeat, absolute repeat. And it was really, I went into historic trauma PTSD, which I showed you in that CEU article in, my nursing CEU. study on PTSD, that they don't even mention the genocide survivors of the American Indian Holocaust. Imagine that. We start with genocide survivors of Hitler, and you know, we can't learn anything from the genocide Holocaust of the American Indians about, you know, what happens to people and how they recover. And no, we don't want to use them in our research. So anyways, it really, I was incredibly traumatized, triggered. I mean, just, and I could not even think about getting near my land or where my stuff, my office stuff, my art. I couldn't. That's my studio. That's my nursery. I knew that my plants were dying. I mean, all of this was so hard for me. So this is, when I say to you, there's a lot of land under Autry's jurisdiction. This is all part of the museum. This is why I was trying to find you those huge plot maps that I got when I worked with the city planning department 20 years ago. I mean, I was right in there with them, and I had plot maps of the whole area of Highland Park, of Mount Washington, and I could show you that how huge a chunk of land this belongs to the museum, which means it belongs to Autry, who took over the museum, saying that they were going to keep it an active museum, and then shut it down, stole the collection. And that's a whole other story, which the community has fought. But again, I finally, in recognizing when I was so traumatized by the city just allowing what it had the means to stop. It had the means to address that homeless encampment, the criminal activity, what was going on across the street, where they were invading my property. I couldn't even, I mean, I was being threatened. They had a means, because they had used that means against me as the property owner for what's going on my property. I'm responsible for that. They could have gone after the property owner. They can go after the property owner. They can insist that you fence. They can do all kinds of things. But they were allowing it to happen. And so in the meantime, because of my artwork, I'm rereading my Chickasaw book in communication with the Chickasaws, and I'm suddenly realizing that it's the exact repeat of Chickasaw history, that it was very intentional. In the Chickasaw book, it says, where they couldn't get them to give up their homeland because they just loved it. They'd give up the rest of their land, but they were not going to give up their homeland. They were not going to budge on that one. And they finally left because of this, the very thing that I went through, that the government refused to enforce the laws in favor of the Indians to protect them from being invaded by the white settlers and the criminal activity and everything that was going on, which they were obligated to do, and they refused to do it. So it was to make them miserable. I can redo that whole paragraph, but it was quite intentional to make them so miserable that they would leave. So and I got it. So here I had been initially, when I got this land right down the street from the Indian Museum, absolutely wanting to be an Indian presence in the community. What more perfect place, right? There is no Indian presence in LA. No, this was the first museum of Los Angeles. And it was for Indians. It was about Indians, American Indians. And so it was like, okay, here's the place that I can be an American Indian, sharing my culture, my history, and it's appropriate because that was what was established here. There isn't, what I hope you're seeing is, there isn't anything else here. So this is the infamous gully that I told you used to be a lake, which is run under the gully itself. They've done something. I've got video documentation when I was being traumatized of just how bad it was. But it used to be a lake, and that's why I don't know that they're going to let him build, because the liquefaction in terms of an earthquake, whenever you had water, I told you that it's going to be, it's not building where there's the potential for liquefaction because of earthquakes, which is a whole other subject in and of itself, is a more complex thing. And I don't know that they're going to let him build, but he wants to build, you know, major multi-unit housing here. So there is nothing, that 8th mile that I just walked. I hope you're seeing this. And that's, I know this is the worst time of year. My property used to be entirely weed infested. All it was weeds. It is all native plants, native California plants, and I'm proud of it. And I really thought that, I believed that people were going to develop this area for, you know, nature, and, you know, that this would be a lovely park, and it would all be about, you know, connecting to the museum and connecting to Lummis and connecting to the Indians. And I fit real well with that. And then I don't want to develop. I want to have my native plants and my art studio and my nursery here, which is what's here. Because this is one of the last standing black walnut trees are protected, sycamores are protected, and oaks, I think sycamores across the street. Native California trees are protected by Los Angeles City Ordinance, which came into being. It didn't used to be, I mean, relatively recently. But I was addressing this as completely anti-development. And it was appropriate because, to me, that space across the street was a questionable build because of the geologicals, because of the seismic issues. So that's the other house, which they're going to put an entire, they're paying $90,000, which I know, to put in an entirely new retaining wall. So it's $90,000 just to replace that retaining wall. There's all kinds of things I could talk to you about setbacks and things that you can do, because the setbacks on the existing houses are not standard, and so there's things that you can do where you don't have to follow the codes that they're using now because you're building in a place where they didn't build up to code. And anyways, those are complicated issues, and I'm trying to keep this a little bit brief. But and so see up there on the hill, those views, and then you can't see it for the smog today. But Mount Baldy is Mount Baldy to the east. Remember Lucky Baldwin, Silver Mine, Mount Baldy, and then San Gabriel Mountains. And again, in December, if we get snow, it's gorgeous. Especially if there's snow both on the San Gabriels and Mount Baldy. So I just felt like it was really hard for me to think about doing this, but I felt like you can't really see the project and the potential unless you see that there ain't nothing here but nature. So I was very reasonable to want to keep it in that, as an artist, as an American Indian, work with that. I mean, my goodness, I'm an expert on native California plants, and I'm right here. You know, I mean, there's things I can do as a volunteer that just with no money make this very wonderful place for people to be. That's what I can do. I'm getting upset, and so I'm rambling. So yeah, you're not really supposed to park it. So I think I've walked the 8th mile and shown you. I will. This should be a bikeway because there's something called the bicycle oven at the other end of this Marmion corridor. People are big on bikes here. People jog over there now all the time. Now it's looking good. I got video documentation of it, really, as it usually is. This is good. This is really good. This is not as it usually is. And then the other thing to know is that when I told you Furness used to go across, according to Tim, who grew up here, and there was when we had a huge El Nino we were kids. I was in 2nd grade, so whatever that is. The slide came all the way, or maybe it was the later one. So much of this that isn't bedrock, the stuff that isn't bedrock has moved, is the point. It went all the way across to the railroad tracks, Tim said. You couldn't get through, it was impassable. So the stuff that was not bedrock, I mean, we've had El Niños, 2 El Niños since that one, that it all went, and nothing's coming down. So what's left, although and this is where the guy pulled a building permit, but didn't build. And again, it's probably not because he couldn't. It's because it's so costly to build, because you have to stabilize so much. But I think I've covered everything, and like I said, this is really hard for me, so if I ramble and didn't do a great job, not that I ever do on these YouTubes, but I think I get a lot of information that we need to cover, so I'm shutting it. Oh, I just want to make sure that you can see the iconic, maybe you can't. Yeah, there, if I stand still. So now, full circle, showing you, I think, everything I can show you with limited equipment, traffic noise, and limited equipment is really the issue. All right. Oh yeah, look at that. Nice. And they do these like annual events for Chinatown runs on the bike and marathons and stuff. Yeah, nice bike route, huh? Okay, yeah, really went all out to make this a designated bike route. I'm sure that's in the works. But not with the Indian, not with the Indian down the street. We're waiting till she's gone. Okay.